You found the Backup Wrap Up, your go to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we tackle something that's every backup person deals with trying to get money for backup. Backup is not sexy, but here's the thing when ransomware hits, and it will hit, you better have good backups or you might end up like the vodka company Stoli that just filed for bankruptcy due to a ransomware attack. Prasanna and I dig into how to convince the people with the purse strings that backup matters. We talk about working with your security folks. Yes, it's the same ones that I used to hate back in the day. And also getting the GRC team on your side as well. If you're tired of being the last priority in the IT budget, this is your episode. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup. And I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years, ever since I had to tell my boss that there were no backups of the production database that we had just lost. I don't want that to happen to you, and that's why I do this. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated backup admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap Up. Welcome to the show. Hi, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and with me I have a guy that I might have to defriend because of his comments today about Wicked. Prasanna Malayanti.
So, hi, Curtis. Yeah, we saw it a couple weeks ago, and I've been listening to the soundtrack, and I think I might have told you the other day I was at work. It was like 7 in the morning, and I had the Wicked, like I had Popular, Ariana Grande's Popular song, just like
Stuck in your
my
head. Yeah.
And I might have tried humming it along aloud, but
It's not really a hummable song.
yes.
It's not really hummy.
So, yes. So I did that, and I enjoy it. So I was listening to the soundtrack today, and there is one song, I'm Not That Girl.
Yeah.
And
You're not. You're not.
Yes, I'm not that girl. And as part of it, she has a crush on someone, and it turns out to be a guy. And so I had asked Curtis a question. I'm like, why does it have to be a guy?
Because that's the story, man.
I'm just saying it's not very inclusive.
The show's about as inclusive as inclusive shows get. You're saying there's not. Well, I would argue that the guy that she has a crush on, how do I put this? I think he might also be open to guys.
Okay.
So maybe, I'm pretty sure. I mean, he's the most free version of Fierro I've ever seen.
But then here's my question is, why couldn't it have been an animal? Like, there's a goat or a sheep in the movie. There are other animals as well.
Because that's
right? or a tree.
No, we can't have human animal relations. That doesn't work. That's a different problem. There's so much there's only so much we can take. There's only so many of the allegory of I mean, the movie's so full of like allegories and like the animals basically represent sort of a downtrodden, what do you call it? A marginalized culture, right?
Yep.
And it's kind of cool in that by being animals in the story, they can represent any marginalized culture, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So
do you still hate me?
How dare you? How dare you criticize my current favorite movie?
Which is, by the way, how many times have you seen it?
3.
Okay.
In the theater 3 times. And I've listened to the soundtrack many times. What?
The movie's been out for 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I saw it 3 times, like on the first weekend. 3 times the first weekend. I think a couple days later is when I saw it with my daughter.
And here you are complaining about Bollywood movies being too long, and yet you spent how many hours in a theater?
I spent 9 hours in a theater seeing this movie. most of which I was awake.
Which is surprising for those of you who
There
may
were
not realize that Curtis tends to fall asleep in theaters.
there were little naps here and there, but I
Now,
do
your
really
wife
enjoy
took
it.
a nap,
Yeah, she did
and she
both
did say it
times.
twice. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
both
but
times.
she napped at different sections, so
Yeah,
she was able to
different. So
actually see
she's not seeing
overall.
each other.
Yeah,
Oh Lord. So for those of you that are, here for a backup podcast, maybe we should talk about that now. Um, I was thinking about this idea of getting buy-in, right? That backup, I don't know if you know this, Persona, backup is not now, nor has it ever been like the sexy part of IT,
yeah.
right?
Do you think it is at the same level of, like, say, networking?
No, it's below networking because I mean, here's why I say that. There are people that like go to college and go through training and like their
Mm,
goal is to be a network engineer. No one goes
goes
anywhere
to
to become a backup person. It's how so many people, including me, got their start or get their start in IT. It's the job nobody wants. And
you,
and
you know.
again, going to the topic, what's that?
I want to meet someone. I bet there is an individual out there who, growing up, they said, "I want to be a backup admin."
They
I
read
bet
my
there's
books.
one
They read my
person.
books and they're like, I want to be like her.
I bet there's at least one person in the world.
All right. If there's somebody out there, especially somebody, you know what? If they exist, they are listening to this podcast. And because they have a Google search, like one of those the automated Google
RSSP,
search.
yeah.
Yeah. For the word backup. And so they found this podcast. And they're like, wait, what is this? I must listen to this. But
But I agree
similar.
with you, though, that
Yeah.
in most companies, right, it isn't the thing that people desire to do. They don't want to stay in backup very long if they can help it, right? It's sort of a stepping
Yeah.
stone to become a sysadmin or an application admin or something else. And also, in terms of like IT budget, it isn't prioritized at all, right? It's like,
Right.
here are some leftover dollars, or here's like a tiny fraction of the overall IT budget. Go do with it what you will.
And I think it's for a couple of reasons, right? One is that backup never added anything to anybody's bottom line,
Yeah.
unless you're a backup company, right? Um,
In the sense that it's
and
not a revenue generating function of the business.
right, it is a revenue taking part of the business, right?
But you could also say like anything dealing with like compliance is also seen that way as well.
Yeah, and it's similar. Compliance is similar in that you're doing it because you kind of have to do it. There may be regulatory issues if you don't do it, right? Because depending on if you're subject to a couple of different regulations, you may be required to protect your customer data, like HIPAA, for example,
Yep.
right? One of the aspects of HIPAA is that you have to protect the data that you're storing, right?
Yep.
Um, and there may be a monetary impact to the organization if it doesn't do the stuff that it's supposed to do for the regulations, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the same,
Especially if you said that it does, but it doesn't, but you didn't.
what?
Especially if you said it does, that you meet those regulatory obligations, but you actually don't.
Yeah, or don't meet them in the proper way, right? Again, I think back, I know we brought this up on the podcast, but when we think about the GDPR, I think about some of the fines, and the one that continually comes to me is this hospital in Portugal that their way of granting various levels of people access to the data was to grant everyone they made everyone a doctor because that was easier, right? And so everyone in the organization, from the janitor to the president of the hospital, had doctor access, which meant they had direct access to, obviously, to medical records.
Yeah.
And the janitor does not need direct access to the medical records. And
Maybe
obviously,
they do.
neither does the administrator of the hospital.
Yeah. Only the
Most of the
doctor.
people
Yeah.
probably, right? A doctor, right? A nurse,
Yep.
but other people don't. And so they basically the regulators, when they looked at this, the response was kind of like, look, you didn't even try.
Hmm. Yeah.
You just said we don't need to do this at all. And so yeah, the same's true here. If you like made a good faith effort, but then there were mistakes, uh, and think bad things happen because your backups or DR isn't good. Bad things can definitely happen to your company. But like you said, if it's obvious that you didn't do anything, or you did such a poor job that it showed that you didn't care, then that could have a significant impact on the business,
Yep.
right? Um, so the question is, when we first start, thinking about this, why is it like that? Can you think of a why? Why is it
Be-
that people think about it as not just an insurance policy, which it really is, but it's an unwanted insurance policy?
Because it costs them money and there's no benefit and it takes people and there's always backup people coming in. If you follow what we talk about on this podcast, you
Yeah.
should be involved in every new application that gets deployed, making sure the backup requirements are there. On the flip side, everyone's like, why is this person showing up? Why are they putting additional requirements on me? Why are they making it such a pain? Right? All I want to do is just build the application and go and start generating revenue.
Right. And then he's just that annoying
Yeah.
person in the meeting of like, did we buy enough? Did we buy enough additional capacity, additional, all of the things that you have to do when you put a new application in did we think
I,
about the fact that we've never backed up AWS before? Did anyone bring
I
that
want
up
to.
when they thought about it?
I wonder if people have a Curtis voice when they're in these meetings as a backup person, and maybe
Hopefully they have somebody who thinks
maybe
like
they
that.
and maybe they have a Curtis on their shoulder. I wonder who the devil would be on the other shoulder. You know?
The other, yeah, we had a guy going all the way back to my first days of my career, a guy named Joe Fitzpatrick, and he was
Hi, Joe.
yeah, hi Joe. He was that guy. He would always raise his hand and say, "Are we getting this on tape?" Right? And he said it with a twinkle in his eye, but he just wanted to remind people,
Yeah.
"Hey, are we backing this thing up? This new amazing thing that you're talking about?" I think it's just like you said, it doesn't make anything faster. In fact, it makes a lot of things slower. It creates like there's an impact on production, right? It might slow things down. It might cause you to do things that you wouldn't have to otherwise do. I think back again me with my stories when I had this knockdown drag out argument with a DBA that didn't want me. Hello, Oracle people. He didn't want me to put the database in archive log mode because he had this weird thing about archive log mode that it somehow caused corruption. And we're like it's a built-in feature of Oracle, right? And so he didn't want me to turn it on, but if I didn't turn it on, I couldn't back up this really big server. By the way, really big. I think it was like 300 gigabytes. It was something. It was huge.
Back in the day.
Yeah. And he didn't want me to turn it on, and he saw that as again as an impediment to him doing what he needed to do, which was be the DBA of this Oracle database.
And the other thing is, say for some random reason that you're doing a backup and the database crashes, who do you think is going to
Mhm.
get blamed? Right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so it gives you all these extra requirements. It makes the system cost more money. I can think of over my career, the meetings where we've have to have, it's like, okay, well, that server has to have, back when we were doing backups very differently than we do today, we had to make sure that every server had a separate gigabit NIC in it. right? Because we had like a backup network, which for the record was the cutting edge thing of the day, was to have a separate backup network because that way you could get all the backups done. It didn't impact the production network.
Yep.
It was also more secure because it wasn't connected to the rest of the network. But that just costs money. All of that stuff costs money, and it slows down the process of acquiring new equipment, new servers, and it's just a pain.
Well, I think you need to show value for the business,
Hmm.
right? How is what you're going to do going to help protect them when things go wrong? How, for example, how
Hmm.
can you tell them, by the way, when ransomware hits, not if,
Right.
but when,
Right.
right? How you can help them get the business back up and running quicker, right? Or get the business up and running at all, and how you can do it quicker than something else, right? And how you can help them recover and not take a huge impact or a huge loss due to a ransomware attack or whatever the disaster may be, right?
Yeah, I think because let's just face it, it is an insurance policy,
Yeah.
right? It is. The backup system only comes into play. It's only useful if something bad happens. And historically, depending on where you lived, it was the degree to which something bad might happen. If you lived in Florida, where I grew up, you had a high chance of hurricanes
Yeah.
and
Or if you
tornadoes.
live in
And
California, where we just had an earthquake about 3 hours ago.
did we up there? Did
Yep,
you have an
I think it
earthquake?
was a 7.8 off the coast of California or of Northern California, and it triggered a tsunami warning.
Did anything happen,
No,
like tsunami wise? Okay.
no.
Um, yeah, you've got that. You've got tornadoes, obviously, in the Midwest and Tornado Alley. But if you were outside of these areas, you could maybe, and then for a while there, we started talking a lot about terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
But it would,
Insider risk?
yeah, but yes, insider risk. What I think always was a concern
Yeah.
because of the problem there mainly, I think, is two things. One is a disgruntled employee or a greedy employee, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to steal something using their access, right? They might even participate. There was you remember that story we did last year where the actual it was from like it came to light last year, but it was from a story from 2 years ago, and that was an IT guy that basically did a ransomware attack on his own company.
Yep.
You remember
Yep.
that?
This is actually unified, ubiquity.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Um. So that's another thing, and then ransomware. The difference, the reason why I was saying before, like if you have one thing in Florida, another thing in California, another thing in the Midwest. And I know nothing about the natural disasters that impact people in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
You know, the other than that tsunami in Myanmar, that was a mess. And the fires in
Yeah.
Australia, but I don't know what like on a regular basis what impacts certain areas. But the thing about that is you're like, it's probably not going to happen to me, right?
Yeah.
Or we can insure against that in other ways, meaning get a really good building, build
Yeah.
higher, get, whatever.
You don't need to worry about the data.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about the data. But a ransomware attack changes all of those things. And for a couple of reasons. One is, and you brought it up already, it's not a if, it's a when, right?
Yep. Yeah, because if you look at how many attacks are happening all the time and the cost of recovering, I actually just read today, no, yesterday. So you know the vodka maker Stoli?
Yep.
They got hit by a ransomware attack in August. They're still down. They don't think they would recover till 2025, and they just declared bankruptcy.
Really?
Yep.
You know what? I think I did see that. Yes, they did just declare. Yeah, they declared bankruptcy because of a ransomware attack.
Ransomware plus some other things happening in Russia, but yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So really what we're talking about is when you when you're trying to sell insurance, you need to convince the other person that they need the insurance.
Yeah.
And in this case, you need to convince upper management that the odds of having nothing happen to them are virtually nil at this point, right?
And I think you don't even need to go directly to upper management.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should partner up with normally there is a GRC team, right? A risk team
Yep.
at a company. That's who I think you should be partnering with to sell your case to executives, because what you think about from a data protection is just part of the overall risk profile of the company, right? There are people and processes and technology and equipment and locations and all these other things that team is worrying about.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the people you should be partnering with
What does
to
GRC stand for?
governance, risk, compliance.
Thank you. Um, and well, let me ask you this. I agree with you. I also
Disagree. I agree.
no, I don't disagree. It's just I like the idea of going to the GRC folks. My concern is if you don't at least work your chain,
Yeah. You should do that as well. Yeah.
you could find yourself in a it's like you're trying to go over their
Yeah,
head
yeah.
kind
No,
of
no, no.
thing.
I agree with that. Yeah, you should work up your chain, but just going directly to like executive leadership,
Yeah.
right? I think you want to go with a broader message, but I definitely think you are going to need the buy-in of your own leadership to be like, hey, this is important. These are the risks, because they have to be worried about that. Because say something happens, you get hit with a ransomware attack, you're down for 3 months. Whose neck do you think is going to be on the chopping block?
Yeah. You know, I learned a long time ago the importance of the chain of command, right?
And you probably learned that in your Navy days too, right?
Well, yeah, definitely in
Yeah.
the Navy days. But my favorite story about the importance of the chain of command was taught to me when being a waiter at Denny's. And when we had this cook who was insane, the story was he literally killed his wife and
Oh,
dismembered
wow.
her and had served his time and was now our cook. That was that was literally the story of this guy. And he was a terror to have in the kitchen. And I worked swing shift. He was the night cook, so he would come in at midnight.
Yeah.
And so half of my shift was this guy, and he was horrible, and he cost me tips all the time. And I went to my manager, and he didn't do anything. And so, I mean, technically, in this story, I followed the chain of command, but I
You weren't
think the
getting any
mistake I made
results.
was like, if you don't do something, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
I'm going to go. So I went to the manager of the store, and I told the manager of the store versus the assistant manager. And then the next day I came in and yeah, so I'm going to tell the story, but I think the lesson I learned in this story is more like know your place.
Yeah.
Is that I went to the manager, and then when I came in the next day, the assistant manager called me into his office, and by office, I mean like, this
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
tiny
Booth.
cubby hole,
Yeah.
and he said, so I heard you went to, management or whatever, yeah. I said, yeah. And he said, do you know who, if we fire Bill, whatever his name was, if we fire Bill, do you know who has to cook? Me, right? And he said, I would have to replace him if I fired him. Do you know how many applications I got last year for cooks? And he said,
One.
he said 3.
Yeah. Okay.
He said, one of the 3 thought maybe he kind of might want to work nights. So
Yeah.
basically, that's like 0 applications for nighttime cooks in the last year. Do you know how many applications I got for waiters last week?
Yeah. He's like, yeah,
He's
that's
like,
where you know your pecking order, Curtis.
if if I'm going to get rid of one of the 2 of you, it ain't going to be the guy
Yeah.
that I can't replace. Yeah. So it just understand especially in a corporate environment, that there is a chain of command, that you do want to make sure you do your best.
Yeah. And
Go ahead.
one other thing to add to that too is you, as a backup person, you don't have the overall visibility into everything going on within the department, right? Or across the company. So it's important because what you think is important may not be part of the overall strategy. Maybe it should be included in the overall strategy, or maybe it's just there are other fires that need to be dealt with. And so what you think is important is not really overall important for the company.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because every department within IT thinks that their
Mhm.
budget isn't big enough and their thing is important and their thing needs to happen, right? It's just that most of the other departments, when you say things like, our database isn't fast enough,
Mm.
our customers can't do the thing. And the boss is like, how much money do I need to give you?
Yeah.
Right? With us, it's like, our backup system isn't fast enough.
So,
Okay, what do I care, right? So you have to translate it into language that they understand, right? You have to
yeah.
translate it into financial risk, risk to the company, risk to going out of business. I think this article would be great, the one about Stoli.
Yeah.
And there are companies that do cease to exist.
We covered
As
that entire series on that, right?
Yeah, we did. There's an entire series on cloud disasters. When you perhaps what you do is you work your chain, and if you just get to a part where you, you get somebody who just doesn't fully understand the risk, what you might then say is, do you think I should involve the GRC folks, right? And you say that not in like a threat,
Yeah.
you know, this is a, do you think perhaps the GRC folks could help us out, like
Yeah.
in terms of selling it up the chain,
Yeah.
right? Work to where you think you can have an effect. If do you think the GRC folks would help us selling it up the chain,
Yeah.
right? Use them as a partner rather than as an enemy
Yeah.
of upper, management. And I will say that sometimes you go to make an argument.
And you lose.
Well, not just you, but you get someone in management who clearly should not be in management
Mm.
of IT. And they literally say things like, well, that would never happen. We're never going to get a ransomware attack. We got great security. We got Steve over there on the firewall, and he's just amazing, right? Um, when you get that, right? Or when you hear something like, I've heard things again like, well, if that happens, I'm probably going to be dead, so I'm not going to
Yeah.
care,
Yeah.
whatever, or I'll probably be fired. I'll probably be fired either way, so I don't really care. I don't really care so much about the longevity of the company as I
Yeah.
do about the longevity of my job.
Yeah.
When you get that's the only time where I think maybe it's time for you to make a career decision. Like if you have upper management that just doesn't care about the viability of your organization, maybe it's time to go convince another organization. And maybe you leaving is the kicker that will help.
Well, the other thing I was also going to mention is when you do get that conversation, just summarize your discussion with that person and send it an email to them
Yes.
to make sure that it has been documented that yes, this was discussed, this was flagged, here
Right.
was the concerns, here's what we had or here's what was decided.
Right.
So
We
you can
decided to
make
do nothing.
yeah.
And
And there
you
might be
recommended
constraints, but
that we won't
there
make any changes at this time.
yeah, and that's okay. That's reasonable because it may not even be malicious, right? It could be we just don't have the budget this cycle.
Right.
We have 20 other fires we're trying to put out. We're
Yeah.
all strapped for cash, right? Whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? There might also be legitimate reasons, but regardless of what happens, once you get to that point where there's a no given, right?
Yeah.
Or someone says no, I think it's important to document.
Agreed. And again, um, be careful how you word that, right?
Yep.
The
Don't place blame. Yeah.
they know they know the reason
Yeah.
that you're doing it, right? But just say, apparently, based on what you said, the department does not have budget at this
Yeah.
time, whatever. You put it in, like you said, you just want to, this is the facts of what happened in the meeting.
Yeah.
Just want to summarize, and again, this goes over much better if you always do that,
Yeah.
right? If you
Yep.
always send an email summarizing the meeting, because probably what will happen is they'll just ignore the one
Yeah.
that you send that is trying to document that they're not giving you what you want.
Yeah.
Right. I think the key thing here that you do have in your favor is ransomware,
Yep.
right? Because ransomware, you don't have to go very far
To see
to
someone impacted by it.
right, to find somebody that's impacted by it, but also you don't have to you if you Google anything, you read anything, you're going to hear it's not if, it's when,
Yeah.
right? Every ransomware book is going to basically
Yep.
tell you that. The one that I'm working on now, we start from an assumed breach standpoint because it's just like, look, first off, there are plenty of other books that are how to stop it, but we're like, look, you're gonna get it. So you can get lots of information to back up your argument, because what you need to do, you need to convince the people with the purse strings that the likelihood of this thing that you're worried about happening
Is high.
is extremely high. And you just want to say, listen, here is our current backup posture,
Yeah.
which is that if that were to happen and they took out our entire data center, it's going to take, it's going to make it, to basically take too long. Again, we might not ever be able to recover, et cetera. Especially if the worry that you have is that the backup system is also vulnerable to a ransomware attack.
Yeah.
It's one thing to say, because of our backup system is so slow, it's going to take us 6 months to recover. It's an entirely different thing to say, we stand a significant chance of having the backup system be impacted from a ransomware standpoint.
It's your last line of defense, right? And
Yeah.
if that's not reliable, then you're a little host. When you're talking about this, Curtis, so one other thing I was thinking about is, especially with ransomware, go partner with the security team.
Yes.
Right? They're usually the ones with budgets. They're usually the ones that people listen to.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because historically, me as a backup person back in the day, I hated the security team. Right. They were always the ones, blocking up ports and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, again, going all the way back to my early days, the only way I could get backups done in a reasonable way was to use RSH, because we were using RDump. And the only way to use RDump was to have RSH as root without a password from server to server. That was the only way to get it done. Right. And it was either that or buy tape libraries for every server, right?
Yeah.
And so of course, the security people thought that was ridiculous, but I'm like, at the day, I can't. So we were at odds.
Yeah.
But I definitely, that things have changed so much for me, that the security people are your friends when it comes to getting budget for backup and recovery and disaster recovery, especially when it comes to ransomware.
So they have common goals.
Yeah.
Right?
Protect
the business, recover.
I heard pot of gold at first, and I was very
a leprechaun. Lucky Charms.
Yeah. No, I think that's I think that'll, and we can kind of end on that. I think that's the risk folks are your partners, but the security people, I think, are really, because they're really core and part of the IT department. And that's why some have advocated, and we've discussed this on the podcast, some have advocated that the backup folks actually report to the security folks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think it's a completely separate discipline, but I think that's solid. And by the way, this has nothing to do with the podcast, but I'm just going to say this. You've got different lighting today, don't you?
No, I have the same lighting I normally do.
I don't know, just there's something about the way the light is hitting your face. You look like it's like you're an AI phone. It looked really good, but it looks so good. They're like, you look like you might be AI. Are you AI?
Yes, I am AI.
Let me ask you this. How many R's are in strawberry?
4.
It's three. Do
I know.
you know this thing about
Yeah,
asking?
yeah.
Yeah,
It keeps getting it wrong.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think it
Um,
actually says 2, right?
it says two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
That's why I said 4.
it's just I've been looking at your face all this time, and I'm like, there's just something about the way you look today. I don't know. Maybe you're AI. Maybe you've been replaced and you don't know. Maybe we're all AI. Maybe we're all in a simulation. Who knows? But I think that's the key. Work your shame. Sell risk. You've got to sell risk. You've got to sell the high probability of a ransomware risk. Use the security folks, use the risk folks as your partners in trying to help get this done.
Yeah.
And honestly, if in the end you do all that and you have a management chain that just refuses to acknowledge that risk, I would suggest you look somewhere else. But that's just me.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts from you, sir?
No, I think that's a good episode. I think that's all I had other than don't you should go watch Wicked again.
I
Yes.
don't think so. I've got other things. I got to do. All right. Well, thank you very much, Prasanna.
Anytime, Curtis.
You and your gorgeously lit face today. I don't know what that's about. Anyway, all right. Thank you to our listeners. We're nothing without you. So be sure to subscribe. And that is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.